The Gort Show is sponsored by Ellipsis Labs. Ellipsis Labs is building Atlas, the blockchain purpose-built for verifiable finance. You may know of Ellipsis Labs by their first product, Phoenix, a fully on-chain order book DEX that's done over $50 billion in unincentivized volume. This is one of the strongest teams I know in crypto. If you're interested in working for a mission-driven company, Ellipsis Labs is hiring engineers who are passionate about crypto and finance to work on Atlas. You can learn more and apply on Ellipsis Labs Twitter, @ellipsis_labs. Don't forget to check out Atlas too, @AtlasXYZ on Twitter. Hey guys, today we're here with Baxus, who is putting Whisky on chain. And this isn't maybe the most typical episode I would do, but I was actually joking with some people recently, and they were joking about Whisky on chain. And I was like, I should talk to the guy who's putting Whisky on chain. Introduce yourself and tell us what you're doing.
So I'm Tzvi Wiesel, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Baxus. And yes, we are putting Whisky on chain to make it really, really simple. Yeah, I mean, that is what we do. What it means, though, is not just like, okay, great, we're just throwing something else on chain. Really, what we're looking at is the global kind of whiskey and spirits market and making that accessible and tradable, and that data and information available, through an on-chain ledger.
Nice. Okay, so can you give us a little bit of background, like maybe just with what got you into whiskey, spirits in general?
Yeah, so I worked at a whiskey event. I was like a staff hand / bouncer / random guy over there. And it was really, I was like 21, maybe 22. Like I had served in the IDF. I had just gotten out, and a friend is like, "Hey, you're big. Do you want to help out at a whiskey event?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I was like really expecting this to be kind of like, the advertisement is like hundreds of bottles of whiskey, dozens of brands. And I'm like, oh, cool. Like they need someone to like drag drunk people out of an event. And that wasn't it at all. It was like a room full of hundreds of nerds that were just obsessed, like going from table to table, like talking about it. I see them doing the swirling and the smelling and the sniffing and all these and I'm like, to myself, I'm like, okay, these are a bunch of lunatics. Like this is absolutely not real. This all looks and tastes the same, and they're all just pretending. But what was super cool was at the end of that night of the event, they ended up tipping us. The vendors gave us all of the open bottles, like all the staff. So they didn't take it home with them, and they gave it to us. So I went home overnight with like a 20 bottle whiskey collection. So I went from having absolutely nothing to, a pretty decent sized collection for someone who again had maybe, I think, Johnny Walker basically was like, a maker's mark. Like I had like maybe 2 or 3 different whiskeys in my life that were like from the, the standard brands. And I kind of fell in love with it. Like I was just like, I just nerded out.
Okay. So yeah, this is good. I can press you on this. Like, when did you realize that you had, well, first of all, do you have discerning taste when it comes to whiskey? And also, when did you realize you did? Like you said that you were looking at these people, who were like, surely this is a charade. Like there's no way they can tell the difference between all this, right? So you took 20 bottles home. Like what made you think that you had some discerning palate? Sorry, I'm like, I'm kind of laughing, but like this stuff does kind of crack me up because I see this with wine, like same thing. My sister's like this, and it just cracks me up. So anyways, go ahead. Like, let's hear when you realize that there's varying qualities of whiskey.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, whiskey people are one level. Like wine people are a whole other level. And we can talk about that later. Like as far as their, if you give them Trader Joe's wine and you did put it blind, 90% of them are gonna, and you told them they were drinking a $5,000 bottle of wine, you'd hear them waxing poetic about, the rainfall of 1972. Yeah. So for me, it didn't start, what it really started off with wasn't like, oh, I have an incredible palate or discerning taste. What it started off with was I tried some of the different bottles and I'm like, wow, I really like this. And I tried something else and I'm like, wow, this tastes like wood chips. Like, it was the fact that I realized like, oh, there's stuff I like and stuff I don't like. Like that was the biggest thing, was just like kind of a super, super basic binary, like, oh, it doesn't all taste the same because this stuff is delicious and this stuff is absolutely terrible. So what happened after that was like, okay, you imitate the charade. Like I watched what the people were doing and I'm like, how do I learn how to taste whiskey and determine what is it that I like and what I don't like? And I started with the bottles I had because in reality, what it mostly was I would just text my friends and I'm like, guys, like, we don't have to go to a bar for weeks. Like we don't have to go spend like crazy amounts of money. Like I have free alcohol. Like we can drink at my place. And so it wasn't, us pouring and doing shots of scotch. It was much more like, okay, let's sit around, drink, pretend we're slightly more sophisticated than we are. But that really was cool because what ended up happening from there was I discovered that there was one bottle that I really, really liked. I liked the flavor. I liked the quote unquote texture, mouthfeel, all those, nerd terms or whatever, but it was a really, really good whiskey. And so I went into a liquor store and I'm like, okay, great. I'm just going to buy myself another bottle because I really like this one. And I'm like, I most certainly am not going to buy myself another bottle because who has $250 to spend on a bottle of whiskey? So that was kind of my awakening into the fact of, okay, there's some really good whiskeys, but they also cost a lot of money.
Nice. Okay. Go ahead. We're going to say something else.
Oh, yeah. So, but that was in New York at the time, but I lived in Jersey. So I was like going back and forth between Manhattan and Jersey. And I went to a liquor store in New Jersey and I found that same bottle and it was like $150. And I was like, all right, that's still pricey, but like, what the hell? Like, how is it that half this bottle is like half the price, just like, 15, 20 minutes away? And that really sent me down the rabbit hole of like global alcohol distribution is probably one of the least efficient things out there as far as markets. You can drive across a bridge or leave Manhattan and go to, Brooklyn or Queens, and you could find the same bottles of alcohol on the shelf for a fraction of the price. And the people in Manhattan are still going to spend it. And listen, it's one thing if you're talking about $150 bottle to $250. Like it's not worth necessarily for people driving across the bridge, paying a toll, looking for the bottle. But there were bottles I was looking at where we're talking thousands of dollars of price difference. So I'm like, wait, you're telling me that you're going to walk into a store in Manhattan and buy this, but I could go drive to Jersey or to Brooklyn and buy the same bottle and sell it to you. You'll save $2,000 and I'll make $2,000. Like there was a lot of spread on some of these.
Interesting. Okay. So then, this I kind of guess leads into Baxus. What was the next step for you then?
Yeah, so from there I got into just like whiskey collecting and whiskey trading. It mostly started off as like, great, I could buy a bunch of these bottles that I found like in Jersey, sell them to people in New York, and then eventually realized I could sell them to people in California and all these other places on like these forums. Buy 3 bottles at 100, sell them at 200, keep one and profit off the rest. But the issue was that, again, it's like I was relying on these at the time, mostly like Facebook groups and forums and places, because like it wasn't exactly legal for someone without a liquor license to be basically smuggling whiskey across state lines and like running them to different countries. And so, it left a gray area, if you will. What on top of that, though, was I started to notice that there was like there was a tremendous amount, though, of opportunity for people to trade, for people who were on these forums, who were swapping bottles. And again, for me, I was focused on, okay, what's a bottle I can make $100 on? But there were people trading bottles where they're clearly only making $15 a bottle. Like it's just that the bottle that somebody wants doesn't exist in their area. It wasn't distributed in their state. So from there, I was a collector. I then ran like a small fund, basically. It was like friends and family, where like we were doing so well that people just put in money. And I'm like, hey, I'm just going to flip whiskey for us. And that went really, really well. And it went particularly well.
Hang on. I'm going to cut you off for 1 second. When you transition from collecting and like selling a little bit on the side, maybe, to running a friends and family fund, what part, like how much of this is legal that you're describing thus far? Like, and I'm curious about like the liquor, like distribution, like all these licenses, like taxes, all this stuff. I'm curious, like just add maybe a little bit of context, because I have no idea, obviously.
Yeah. So up until the point where I was doing the fund, 2% was legal.
Nice. Rag keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Straight, like, yeah, it was like I said, a legal gray area as to how exactly it was. Not an attorney, not financial advice or legal advice. But that part was Yeah. So when I started to do the fund, I had to change again. It was the exact same thing. I was dealing with other people's money now. So it was different. I had to granted, it was friends and family. They were in it for the collecting also, but I had to think about it in a different way. Like, okay, what is necessary? Like, what licenses would I need if I wanted to scale this? Because again, this wasn't a massive, tremendous, oh, great. We're going and raising tens of millions of dollars, like nothing close. It was, and what I found was like, okay, here's the process. Here's why I can go onto StockX and buy sneakers that somebody else bought at Nike, but I don't have a marketplace for spirits. Like I can't do that with alcohol right now.
Got it. And okay, so yeah, so then you're at the friends and family fun point, and then transition into fully on-chain selling whiskey.
Exactly. So what happened after that was I realized I'm like, okay, this more so than sure I can keep arbing, making profits on this, but I was like, but imagine how much larger this, literally looking at StockX and looking at what it did to the global secondary market for sneakers.
Yeah.
I was like, imagine how much larger this market would get if somebody, instead of you having a bunch of guys trying to trade illegally and figure this out, you took all of that effort and you made a marketplace. You made a place where people could actually see prices and could legally do these transactions so that you could go and raise an actual fund or get people to actually contribute cash or capital or to do this on their own, rather than trying to find a bunch of guys who are willing to kind of play at the very edges of the law. And that was really that I felt was like, okay, we can go and do the hard work on the regulatory side so that we can make this accessible.
And then, so how does Baxus work? Is it peer-to-peer, or do you guys have inventory? Yeah, you can just now kind of explain the whole premise.
Yeah, so Baxus is a peer-to-peer marketplace. But, and this is again part of kind of the key part on the regulatory side, it functions peer-to-peer, and this is one of the real benefits of the on-chain status. But the actual legal side is that there needs to be an intermediary that is a liquor license holder that processes the transactions. I can't sell you a bottle of alcohol legally, but if I list so when I send my bottles to Baxus, we at Baxus scan them, we authenticate them, we then tokenize them, including the 360-degree scan. You see exactly what bottle it is that you're getting, all of the metadata about the bottle, the information, the history, etc. When you go on and purchase that bottle, what actually happens, and this is again just the cool part about the on-chain, is you're purchasing it through an intermediary wallet. So I list it in my wallet. There's a webhook, through the transfer hooks through the new token extensions on Solana. It gets transferred into the liquor license holding wallet, and then it gets transferred into your wallet. So you're actually buying it technically from a legal liquor license holder, but the entire feel of the transaction is peer-to-peer. I get paid because I sold the bottle. You've paid for the bottle, and the bottle's in your account. But for those split seconds that actually work, it actually transfers through an intermediary wallet.
Okay, but somebody has to have a KYC account to purchase. No, you can just go on. So what happens if you sell a bottle to a 14-year-old in, I don't know, Argentina?
Okay, so here's a weird one. Have you ever seen the TV show Nathan For You?
Yeah, of course. It's one of the best.
Okay, so do you know the episode where he's
yes,
we sell
where
alcohol
he sells
to minors?
It to people when they're 20. Yeah, he holds it for them until they're 21. Yeah, of course. Go on.
So that's exactly it. Our KYC only has to come at the point if you actually want to redeem the bottle and take possession of it. We need to make sure that you're actually of legal drinking age. You actually, you can buy the bottle and leave it in the vault. We are not advertising this. This is not the key target point of our audience. But we actually don't need to KYC people at the point of purchase. It's literally only if they want to take and receive the bottle. And if you think about it again from a perspective of any online liquor store that ships, and there are a bunch, none of them do KYC. The KYC at that point is just down to the adult signature required for the package.
This is hilarious. This is actually the Nathan For You episode. Also, to give some context, what happens in that episode for listeners? He goes into this gas station and agrees to sell he herds these 18-year-olds into a gas station, agrees to sell them alcohol underage. They're high schoolers. They want alcohol underage. And then he tells them that they can come back and redeem it when they're 21. Okay, so that's pretty hilarious.
To boost the profitability, he starts running ads. We sell alcohol to minors. That is his whole campaign. Now, again, that is not our unique selling point, but it is a weird, strange, obscure fact in the actual legalities of the alcohol markets.
Okay. So the bottles are tokenized on chain, like as NFTs. Is this correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then you have a storage facility somewhere, vault, where you hold on to them. And then if somebody actually wants to redeem, that's when you go through the KYC. What do you see like in terms of the majority of your, I don't know, volume? Is it bottles that are like what is like the pricing and what do people want from? Yeah, you can just start rambling about whiskey now, and I'll pry when I think it's funny.
Yeah, so I think the cheapest or least expensive bottle I think that's sold so far was $40 to $50. And the most expensive single, we had some more expensive individual assets because we have full casks of whiskey as well. Like you don't have to just buy a bottle. You could buy a barrel that's still sitting in a warehouse, like at a distillery aging.
And you can redeem that?
So legally, no, you cannot take the barrel home with the alcohol in it, but you can have the alcohol bottled. Like you could release your own brand, like Gwartz, and literally go and do whatever you want with that. Like, brand it, come up with a label, do whatever, and take those bottles, take, 2 cases at home, send the rest of them to Baxus so you could sell them to the masses, do whatever you want, like literally whatever you want with that. And like afterwards, like you'll also get the empty wooden barrel shipped to your house. Like we literally, like we do barrel picks, like we work with distilleries and we do these private picks. And like one of the areas of like our office right now has like just a bunch of empty wooden barrels that I will eventually turn into like my desk or something. Like I'm going to do something cool with them. But for now, yes, they're just wooden barrels. So because of, understandably, like they don't want, laws, you can't have a full barrel of bourbon just getting shipped out to your house where you just like sit there, put a little spigot in and just tap the barrel every day. But you can buy a full barrel and then do either a private label or do a co-label with a brand, like a private pick of one of your favorite brands. That's something that can be done. So we've had really, really expensive barrels and really expensive bottles sell on the marketplace.
How much does what's a really expensive barrel?
$750,000.
Okay. Yeah. And how many bottles are in a barrel?
It varies. It varies, but assume on average, like this is the average. And again, there's a calculator and we let you know beforehand, like we could do the math for it, but assume about 200-ish bottles come out of a barrel. That's like usually a general assumption. There's different size barrels. I'm not going to get into all of that. But when you hear the term like for example, barrel is actually a size. Like the generic term is actually a cask.
I figured.
Cask is like the generic term. Barrel is actually a size of wooden container.
Okay, so going back for a second, when you said you sold a bottle on the low end for $40 or $50, like what are people doing there? What is the like? Are they intending to hold that as an NFT and allow it to age and sell it for like $100? Like what is the theory behind like very like lower end bottles of whiskey?
Yeah. So most of the lower end stuff gets redeemed. It's like, somebody found a great bottle at a great price, or a bottle that doesn't exist in their area or was discontinued, or, that they don't have, or they do have and they want another one of. So that's the lower end stuff, is like, which ultimately is like the best part of whiskey for people who treat whiskey as an asset class. Is if it weren't for the fact that there were people out there actually drinking them, like you'd have a fixed supply and it would never reduce. But what makes it super interesting is that it actually is deflationary, because if I make 200 bottles and 150 of them get consumed, like there's only 50 left, and there will never be any more of that specific bottle that I've released. So that's where this like cult status, collectability, and the actual pricing changes really comes into play.
What does it cost to ship a bottle that's like $50?
So in general, the shipping, and again, it varies slightly across different things. In general, we have like in the US effectively flat rate for up to 6 bottles of, I think it's like $30 for 30 bottles for like $30 for up to, I think 2 or 3 bottles, and like up to $50 for 6 bottles or something. So
got it.
So the person who bought the $40 bottle, it would cost them $30 to ship it. So it's not worth it for them to ship that single bottle, but they might do it with a couple of other bottles and then have those bottles shipped to them, which is typically.
Yeah, I mean, like, generally my view on, blockchains as a whole is like, it's a massive charade. But I will say it's actually quite fascinating to me because this is an example of something where you can buy, like, you want to buy something for $50, but you don't want to redeem that necessarily until like you would have, there's like a big opportunity there. Whereas if you went on a normal website, yeah, I mean, you're not going to buy, like, you're not going to go on a Web2 app, like, I guess, whatever what is it called? The sneaker thing? StockX?
StockX, yeah.
Yeah, StockX. You're probably not just going to have them hold those like in, I don't know, layaway or something, unless that does occur. I don't know. Is that the same premise or not really?
No, I think StockX, I think at some point was experimenting with some sort of vault. Like, I don't remember, like they were planning to do something with it. I don't know what ended up happening with that. I think they got sued originally because they were like doing 3D renders of branded sneakers. And it's like, hey, like you can't use our artwork. Like you can't put a Nike swoosh on something. Like, so for us, that was a big thing, is like, we don't 3D render. Like we literally scan the bottles. Like we literally like actually, so like it's photographs, like you're buying the bottle. But most places, if you go onto like, again, almost any website, like even for Amazon or whatever, and you don't have Prime and it's like, hey, this is going to cost, it's not like, okay, great. Sure. Like it's like, oh, do you want to add like 5 things to your order right now that you don't need so that you can like qualify for free shipping, or like, so it's cheaper. It's not like, hey, come back in 2 weeks or 3 weeks when you need this. And that matters also because there are people who buy bottles that they're like, listen, this is a great price and I'm going to want this, but I don't want this right now. Like I have one right now on my shelf and I'm just making sure I'm securing I have one for the future. Or I want to get one and I want to gift it to someone, or I want to get one and I want the bottle, but I'm flying, I want it for my friend's bachelor party and we're all flying there, but none of us are checking bags. And, you can't bring alcohol in a non-checked bag because it's more than 3 ounces onto a plane. And so, hey, ship it to me in, I don't know, Colorado, where I'm going to be for the bachelor party. So like that kind of, it gives them that flexibility also, where like they own the asset. They own it. The digital, their token is their digital ownership, like ticket, and their proof of ownership. And then they can go into the app at any time and have it redeemed or relist it and sell it if they decide, you know what, I actually don't want this bottle anymore. I decided I hate it.
Thanks for listening to The Gort Show on the Blockspace Podcast Network. Subscribe to our newsletter at blockspace.media to get the show directly to your inbox. Show links, transcripts, and Bitcoin articles twice per week. Stay ahead of the conversation by visiting blockspace.media.
Like I can go on, purchase a bottle, have the NFT, and I can just send that to another wallet, right? Or do I have to go back through Baxus? Yeah. Okay. That's pretty, it's interesting to me. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I'll say that. So what are the kind of like assurances that you give on the counterparty side, right? Like you talk about, you scan the bottles and you hold them in the vault. Like what do people need to trust when they receive an NFT on the blockchain, but it's like, not actually the bottle? Like what do you have sort of to, I don't know, counterparty risk or whatever?
Yeah. No, so that was a big one. So the first thing is that like, and this was a big part of it, is the authenticity of the bottles. So that's why we scan each individual bottle and like we make that publicly available, because if, for example, there was something that we ever did wrong, we would want like, Whisky is full of like some of the best and some of the worst people on earth are like Whisky fans.
Same as crypto.
Yeah, no, truly. Like there are people who are out here like, hey, you're looking to get into this and like, get financial freedom. Like I'm going to help you. And then there's people like, oh my God, I can't believe you chose that chain. You're like a monster. And they're so tribal also in these things. And everyone knows better than everyone else. And if you think that KOLs are bad in crypto, like, let me tell you, my man, like what is going on in Whisky is like unhinged. Like crypto is an infant compared to the insanity that is the Whisky market and Whisky influence. But
I wanted to ask, okay, so you say you authenticate the bottles. One, how do you do that? And two, have you ever had fake bottles sent to you?
Yes. So first is a lot of it is done really manually. It's like, what you're looking for. You have like human experts and stuff, and myself, and we have other members of our team who use the scans themselves, who live overseas, that are like Whisky experts that have studied this. There are, I don't have it next to me, but I mean like encyclopedic sized books that like we use to like analyze a tax strip to make sure that like, okay, this bottle says it was from 1963 and there's a tax strip on it. Like, is it the correct tax strip for 1963? Because a lot of times there will be an error where it might not even be that the bottle was open and faked, but like the tack strip fell off. So somebody was like, oh, it doesn't look right. So they just buy one online and put it on. It's like, no, this is incorrect. So like now we can't trust the integrity of this bottle because it also may have been opened and resealed at some point between 1963 and now. So things like the tack strip, things like the fill level of the actual, like how much alcohol, like how much of the whiskey is in there. Or I say whiskey, but again, I want to be clear. It is really any spirit. Like, we have people who trade tequila and rum also, but, whiskey is kind of the go-to. It's that's the biggest market for sure. So label details, because there's a couple of different types of fakes, and I'll explain. And we found both types. One of them is literally somebody manufactures and prints like a fake label and puts it on a bottle, or like literally tries to recreate another bottle and fakes it that way. So what you're looking for over there is like, is it the right bottle? Is it the right glass? Is it the right, like all of those little details, are those accurate? And then you look at the label, like, is the label correct? And we found those, and I'll tell you about that after. And then the other side, which is trickier, but again, you can really, if you know what you're looking for, get to, is there's a market on eBay for empty bottles of expensive alcohol.
Yeah, I think I've heard of this.
So they buy a real bottle, they refill it with something else, they reseal it, they try and pass that off as the original, and then that is something that they then try and sell into the market. And so there's a bunch of different ways to track those, and different things like that, including there's a network of people who literally, not going to say who or whatever, but they scour like the internet and eBay and scrape the data. And like, we have a running database of like bottle serial numbers of bottles that have been resold as empty. So if that bottle with that serial number comes in, like, we know that is a refill of the bottle. Plus, on top of it, because of the way that we do the scanning and like the light chamber that we use, like the actual like sealed box, like with the identical lighting conditions. So we can tell if like the color variance is off between a bottle and like what it should be, like what the baseline should be. Because for most people, you pick up a whiskey and you're like, it's brown. And then you like actually get down to like the real kind of, okay, well, we've analyzed 5,200 images of it, and like it's this shade of brown, and this one is way, way, way off. So that runs as well.
What do you think is... Okay, so I'll tell you what I'm hearing, and you can kind of corroborate this. In terms of the blockchain aspect, I think the biggest unlock, if you will, is that maybe you can, assuming this grows to a sufficient size, like we can find very much more efficient markets for price discovery, or whatever you want to call it, for whiskey, and being able to trade sort of permissionlessly outside of redeeming it is the, incremental improvement to the whiskey markets. Is this sort of how you see it? I'm interested, like, why do we need a blockchain? What are your thoughts, like with regards to that question?
Yeah, so there's three pieces to the blockchain that I think make it really valuable, and the biggest economic one is exactly what you're saying, just permissionless or slightly permissioned, depending on like different laws and countries. But like basically that ability to massively scale up this whiskey market without the need to do all the shipping. So it's not we're like, it's on the back end and it's not a thing that we market. It's not like part of but in reality, like if we were to sit down and actually calculate the amount of like, just from an environmental perspective, like every time I get shipped a bottle of whiskey, right, it goes into a box, and then it goes in with like bubble wrap and packing peanuts, and it gets shipped from it gets shipped from Kentucky to California, then Kentucky to New Jersey, then California to New Jersey, then New Jersey. When I sell it to a guy in Michigan, it goes New Jersey to Michigan, then Michigan to Florida. Like these bottles have an entire massive life cycle as an asset or as a collectible that it goes way, way, way beyond just like their actual point of fabrication until the bottle is actually opened and consumed. And so every single time that bottle is getting reloaded up with packing peanuts and bubble wrap and loaded onto a plane, like there really actually is a whole like there's actual loss, like economic loss over there, because every person is paying that $30 in shipping, when it's like, why? Like, think about how much more efficient this could be if we're just trading a bottle. And then from that environmental perspective, well, wait a second, what if we could keep these bottles in a more central location as they're produced? Not the stuff that you want to go to a liquor store that people are looking to drink every day, but specifically for the stuff that's really, really tradable and collectible. You have that side of it as well as kind of just that impact. The other two, so there's that economic growth, and then it's also the ability now to sell overseas. So for example, Canada is a perfect example. it is very, very, very difficult / obscenely expensive to import alcohol into Canada. Like if you're trying to import for like, consumption or whatever. So Canada, because of that, has far fewer, like in Canadians have far fewer options as to what they're able to buy from like a whiskey and spirits perspective. Same thing. We're not like, for us, we tell people like, you can buy it, you can be in Canada. Like we have plenty of Canadians who use our platform, but what we tell them is like, if we ship it to you, it's like you might buy in $100 bottle and you're going to pay $400 in taxes. Like it's not worth it for you to ship it. But if you're ever traveling to the US, if you have a friend who's coming to Canada, you can redeem that bottle and you're allowed to bring up to whatever, 2 bottles in legal, like in your luggage, like you can bring that in with you. Like you can get these bottles then. Like you can actually have someone bring it to you. So when somebody comes in for one of these conferences, for any of these crypto things, and they go and they're like, oh, I'm going to be in New York for NFT NYC, or I'm going to be in California or something, like they redeem the bottle, they get sent to them, and then they can bring it back with them. And so like there is even just that side of like that global distribution area is now solved, where you're not again dealing with this massive amount of deadweight loss or like the lack of access because of like local taxes, tariffs, and fees. So that's another part of it. But the real big again things of the blockchain is the other two are provenance and authenticity. Like right now, the authenticity is being done, once it hits Baxus. So these bottles may have been in the market for 100+ years in some cases, like really old bottles. But the goal is that the technology is expanding in such a way, especially when it comes to the authenticity component, that we have technology that a distillery could put into their bottle, like a chip or a bionic marker of some sort that would then verify the validity and the authenticity of the bottle, so that like it's almost like, imagine like if trading cards were put into PSA slabs before they went into the pack.
Yeah.
So like we can do that with them, so that in the future you don't have to like, you can scan it on your phone or tap something to verify the authenticity instead of having to send it to a vault to get it authenticated to then be able to go and bring it to the market. And the same thing applies to provenance, which is like, if you look, it's less relevant in whiskey but super relevant in wine, like how it's stored, who owned it, making sure it's real because of the amount of wine forgery and wine fraud that there is out there. And so provenance on chain becomes, again, like that's part of the narrative and the story of the bottles themselves. It becomes like a super, super interesting thing that, I mean, if you're thinking about on chain as like a long-term immutable database, like a permanent database, like then provenance is something that absolutely should be on there.
Do you have a physical location that people can come pick stuff up?
Yep. So our vault, we have 2 vaults in Jersey right now, in New Jersey, and we have another one that's opening on the East Coast. We're part of our plan for next year is to expand overseas, as well as maybe some other locations in the US. But yeah, you can like physically come to the vault and like actually pick up bottles or redeem things. Like, again, if you're traveling through, if you don't want them shipped, there are certain bottles that we tell people like really old decanters that are really fragile, or certain things where we'll tell them like, we will either ship this to you decanted, like we will open it on camera so you see that we're like filling up a real bottle with the liquid that you want, or you have to pick this up in person, because like the odds that this breaks in transit are way, way, way too high. And we want to make sure that you understand that, like, we don't want your bottle breaking, so we'll decant it for you and send it in a regular bottle, and you'll get the decanter separately as like as a nice thing to have out on your bar for display. Or if you really want it sealed, like come pick it up in person, because like you should drive this back. There's certain bottles that were not designed to really be shipped this many times, and or they're 50, 60, 70 years old, so they've the corks have kind of worn down a little bit at this point.
Do people who use Baxus know let me rephrase this. Does everybody who uses Baxus know that it is blockchain based, or are there? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that was like our biggest thing from the get-go, was like, we actually don't, unless you understand blockchain and like want to do things that like really, really are blockchain based, we don't want you to know that it's like, it adds no value to you, to the average user, to know that it's blockchain based. In fact, it actually, when we did market and focus a little bit more on the blockchain side at the beginning, we found that like we're actually scaring some of like the traditional whiskey users who are like, I don't want your magical internet money. Like, please, like, I just want my.
What percentage of your users are like? Obviously, I know you through crypto. What percentage would you say are crypto people who are using, like Web3 wallets, browser wallets, whatever, and looking at this more as a trade / NFT to hold versus Whisky people who have no idea about our magical internet money?
Yeah, so I'd say, so right now, the way that we design the system, again, in order to make it, and there will be a more crypto kind of mode that you could flick on. So right now, there's no external wallet connection. When you sign up and you use your email, it actually spins up like a MetaKeep wallet. So it spins up a wallet for you. Now, if you're not a crypto person, that means nothing. It just means you log in with your email. That's what you're familiar with. When you go to checkout, you can pay with a credit card, or the only time you would really connect your wallet would be we also have HelioPay. So you can pay with HelioPay and you can actually pay with crypto. So that's so what we found is so from the HelioPay side, about 10% of the transactions on Baxus are being done through HelioPay. And that means that these are users who, again, are obviously more crypto savvy. They have a Phantom or a backpack or, some sort of Solana wallet. But what it also means is that they're smart enough and realize if you use HelioPay, you don't pay 4.5% credit card processing fees. And so that is kind of our gateway, if you will, and something that we've actually successfully done with a couple of users is we emphasize that. It says pay with, Apple Pay, credit card, Google Pay, or whatever. And then it's and then it literally says underneath, let's say, whatever, it's a $100 bottle and so it'd be $4.50. And it would be pay with crypto, save $4.50. And it shows you exactly how much you would save every time you transact. And the idea is we're working now with, we work with CoinFlow and we're working with a couple of different companies to actually make it so that people are more comfortable, basically preloading their accounts with what will be effectively USDC and telling them hey, and this where you're gonna save now. So if it's not a huge deal if you're buying a $100 bottle, but some of these guys buy a couple of $1,000s worth of whiskey a month. We're hey, you could save real money. You could end up saving about 5% plus if you just use online dollars. If you just, instead of paying each time with your credit card, you get set up. And so we have been able to successfully onboard people into the, oh, this makes sense, USDC side of it, the stable coin payments. They're still not looking for alts or any sort of actual tokens, but just even on the stable coin side of wait, I can now pay and it costs me less.
Wait, does HelioPay, I've seen this before on other DeFi applications, but does that allow just a direct connection from, I don't know, Phantom or Soulflare, one of these, without linking a bank account or KYC? It does have some banking aspect, right? You can use a credit card to load on HelioPay, but can you also use it without any type of
Yeah. So that's I think HelioPay does allow for credit cards, but we, our whatever the modal that we're using is really just the crypto side because we have a really good credit card processor. So HelioPay right now for us is just exactly that. I connect my Phantom wallet and I just deposit it I pay for my bottle through HelioPay from my Phantom wallet. It's you sign the transaction, it tells you how much. And what's cool about HelioPay also is that you can pay not just using USDC. So let's say a bottle's $100. You can pay with Sol and it'll market convert whatever it is. There might be, I'm sure there's some fees there on the conversion, but it'll market convert that into dollars. Because again, what was super concerning for our users is if they're selling a bottle, they want to know that they're getting paid in dollars. Now they don't know that when it sits in their account or whatever, it's in USDC. And then when they go and connect to their bank and they off ramp, it's actually off ramp, it's USDC becoming dollars. But that for us was really important that they see it in dollar denominated and that they're getting paid in dollars. But you as the consumer who's crypto savvy can say, great, I don't know, I have a ton of bonk that I bought, at a much, much, much lower price. And I'm going to go and spend bonk now to buy, a bottle of whiskey.
Yeah. It's gas abstraction or something sort of similar. Do you expect, I don't know, so it's not possible now without using an email, but will in the future you be able to just connect the same way that we connect to all these other websites completely indiscriminately without any understanding of what we're signing?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. We're going to do an external wallet connection where you can just, again, if you don't want to use an email, you can do it that way. The reason that we do the email thing now, and even then we would still probably have people is because of just the communication part, communicating with wallets is really bad right now. If we're going to do it, one of the cool things about it is
I see what you're saying.
If you have a bottle, right? So we do these certain limited edition bottles, right? You buy a certain special bottle, you could we've had brands that have invited people who bought a bottle from their brand to hey, if you're in New York City, we're hosting this event. it would stink if all the crypto people who are like, oh, it's in my Phantom wallet, and so like I am now missing out on all the, like, we're not going to see NFT spam your wallet with like invitations that are like, you're invited to the, where you have to worry that you're being scammed and lured to, some place where they're going to rob you. Like, so it's a really, that's the issue right now, I think, with just the pure wallet infrastructure for things that like where there is some sort of social component, is that like, well, how do I let you know that? Like, how do you know? So I guess the alternative would be like, okay, we make like a token gated Telegram group, so anyone who owns a Baxus thing can be in there. And then, but like, again, you're adding so many layers and requirements to people that it's like, hey, if you get an email that says like, congratulations, your bottle is here, or you have access now to another special bottle. Like brands have done this on Baxus already, where it's like, hey, we want to reward users who are buying our bottles and redeeming them, who are actually drinking the bottles, because that's like what we make them for. And so we have a new limited edition whiskey coming out, and we want to make it available exclusively to Baxus users who have bought one of our products in the past. We need a way to get in touch with you.
It's all very fascinating to me. And I will also say a little bit of context as to why I wanted to have you on / agreed to have you on, is because I do think that the blockchain aspect to this is that you come at this much more from the angle of like, we're providing a service here, and you have like a real claim on providing a valuable service, authenticating bottles, storing them for people, coordinating shipping. Like that is a real value add. I mean, I'm not a whiskey connoisseur, as you can tell, but at the same time, like I see where that is a genuine product you're adding versus coming at it from the like, surely something like this needs to be on the blockchain, right? So okay, I wanted to provide context to listeners like for the 10th time, because this is just not usually, I'm usually talking about like some MEV nonsense, right? And so I just wanted to give like a little bit of background, but yeah, that to me is like, it's interesting, right? It's interesting.
Yeah, again, and this was a big thing, like, and it, when we first got started, like this was a big thing. We started in May of 2021. So the first thing was like, we were building a consumer app on chain for non-crypto users on Solana in May of 2021. Like you can imagine, like nobody was having more than a 3-minute conversation with us. Like they're like, I don't get it. Like, they're like, wait, you're doing NFTs? We're like, sort of. They're like, okay, do it on Ethereum. We're like, no, that doesn't work. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, if I'm buying in $100 bottle and you tell me that there's a $400 gas fee, like I'm not going to buy the bottle. Like it didn't, like it fundamentally, like we were looking at this as like okay, blockchain has these really great capabilities and can enable really great things for commerce. And again, and for this types of like liquidity and capital formation, but it's not going to do it if people don't realize like we spoke to people originally who were like, oh, I get it. So like you get the bottle, you scan the bottle, you destroy the bottle, and then I trade the NFT and that has all the value. And I'm like, no, like people drink whiskey. They don't drink pictures. They don't wear JPEGs. Like when people are like, oh, you just sell sneakers, but the sneakers are digital. And I'm like, no, like people got so obsessed with the idea that the metaverse was literally going to become a place where we spent every moment of our time in 2021. Like they couldn't fathom the idea of people having physical needs or wants, desires anymore. And so that was like a really like a big thing for us. We're like, no, like, my co-founder, who's our CTO, is like, she studied distributed computing theory for her. Like, she looks at this from the way that I look at whiskey, like she looks at blockchain. And for us, it was like, how do we build the best consumer experience on the internet that like benefits and uses all these things? So like the blockchain components in the future, as they expand, will be rewards and tokens and like even DeFi now, which is awesome. Like we partnered with a company called Loopscale. They used to be called Bridge Split. Yeah. They used to be, and we have like people are borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars against their whiskey, like on Loopscale right now, which is like something you couldn't do if you didn't have this like DeFi thing where like we're the custodians. So people know that the bottles are like, if it's a Baxus NFT, the bottle is there. It's in our vault. We have it. We own it. They have the tokens. All the value and the historical pricing data is made available on, like that we make available to them. And so they can like actually underwrite and effectively lend people money where it's not just like, okay, and the assets are substantially less volatile than like, okay, I'm going to lend you money against like a token. Oh, there was some strange news yesterday. The market collapsed by 97%. Like that doesn't happen on the whiskey side, or on really any, most physical collectibles or assets or whatever. Like with trading cards, I guess like if the player murders somebody, maybe like their value of their cards will go down substantially overnight. Like maybe, but maybe not. Maybe people will be like, oh, they're never going to make any cards of him again. Like these are going to become super collectible. Like I don't know. Like I don't. That's not my market.
Yeah, it is fascinating. It does seem to me this caters more toward higher value in the long run, and like higher value bottles of whiskey, and just the collectible aspect. Like what do crypto people love to talk about? Veblen goods, it's like they love to talk about how these are Veblen goods. Like, oh, it's like very profound of you, but it definitely does seem to be something that caters more to this, insofar as you have these sophisticated collectors, drinkers, and I suspect that in the long run, you're not going to have a ton of $40 and $50 bottle volume. Is this sort of what you expect as well? Like you're hoping to onboard more and more of these kind of high value bottles, collectors, and like match people in this type of market?
Yes and no, in the sense of it's actually our goal is actually almost to do the exact opposite, is hopefully over time as economies of scale increase. Yeah. What we want is, so we have an app that we acquired a year ago, and like we've been working on scaling and kind of integrating, and it's going to become the Baxus app. But that app is it's called Booze App, and it's just a way to track like what bottles you already have at home or what's on your wish list, and it gives you like what retail pricing should be, like gives you kind of some pricing data. And so we have like people are tracking like over 1.6 million bottles on their bars at home. So like we have a really good insight into like what you as a drinker or as a collector have. And our goal over time really is, again, it comes down to being able to operate at the scale of like an Amazon thing or something of that capacity, where it's like you then, when a new bottle comes out, like a brand comes to us to say like, we want to make sure that the first 1,000 bottles we release go directly to people who are consumers of our product already, instead of trying to shoot blind and distribute them into, random liquor stores across the country and try and figure out the data that way. So it is kind of multifold, but that I would say focuses more on what would be better and more beneficial in the long term, is that more of the $50 bottles are being, like, I love liquor stores and liquor store owners. So I'd rather it be that like there's more transparency and the app becomes a way for you to find a local store that has your $50 bottle. Yeah. But that the Baxus becomes kind of that order book where you see the bottle's $50 at your local liquor store, but there's a standing bid on Baxus right now at $100 because somebody can't get this bottle. And so you can buy it at your local shop and then send it into the vault and fill that order.
Interesting. I guess I'm a little skeptical of the costs associated. I mean, you have a better idea, but it just doesn't intuitively seem that when you start working out with $50 bottles of whiskey, or even like $30, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like that the effort is there, but I don't know. Go ahead.
No. You're right. Again, this is, like I said, it's something that has to work when you can get to economies of scale. If you're paying $30 to ship and you have a $50 bottle, it makes no sense unless you're selling that bottle for substantially more. But what happens in the whiskey world is those $50 bottles become the $300 bottles of tomorrow, because, they get consumed and there's high demand, and like I'll give a perfect example. Pappy Van Winkle, like the MSRP of a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle is like $250 for like the 23-year-old, and that's a $5,000 bottle. So, like,
why do you say wait? When you say it's a $5,000 bottle, according to who? Collectors?
According to the market. Like, people will pay. Liquor stores have it at about $5,000. You can trade it on the secondary markets if you're in at about $3,800 to $4,300 a bottle. But if you look,
you're saying when they launch. When they drop it, it's $250.
That's how much they suggest. The manufacturer suggested retail price at a liquor store should be $250. There are almost no liquor stores on planet Earth that get a bottle of Pappy that will charge you $250. But there are some. There are some that will actually sell to their best customers at MSRP. But you can flip it instantly, like into a standing order for about $4,000.
What is Pappy Van Winkle selling it to liquor stores for?
If it's $250 on the shelf, they're probably paying and this is, by the way, they're paying the distributor who's not Pappy, because Pappy has to sell it to a distributor, and then the distributor has to sell it to a liquor store. Like, this is part of why the liquor markets in the US are so completely inefficient, is like you have artificial middlemen. But that means the liquor store is probably paying $200 for a bottle that it's selling for $250.
And then somebody can turn around and flip that for $4,000. I feel like we should take advantage of this.
Welcome to Baxus. This is exactly it.
Do distributors, I'm like getting so in the weeds here, but do distributors have a regulatory moat? Like, I assume, is there a lot of regulation around distributors? And then there's also liquor license and more regulation around liquor store owners too, I assume. So, but what is the like kind of moat around distributors? Like, I honestly, once again, very naive on this subject, but I sort of assumed that Maker's Mark sold directly to liquor stores, but I guess, there's another middleman. So what is the kind of like moat there?
So the moat is each state, if you want to go to, each state has its own liquor laws. That's the first moat. And so there are states that are called control states or ABC states. And those states, the distributor for the state is a bureaucratic office that is like the state liquor buyer. Like, there is someone whose job is like, I am the government buyer of alcohol. And,
there's states in the South where you literally have to go to a government store to buy alcohol. Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah. Sorry, go on. I saw this recently. Go on.
No, exactly that. So now think about this for a second and go like, okay, when we talk about, whether governmental corruption or whatever it is, like, how do I get my product into a state where there's a government bureaucrat who's responsible to decide what brands their state is going to carry in all of their liquor stores? Like, genuinely, you have to go in wine and dine this person without doing it illegally and bribing them to be like, hey, you should carry my product over here in your stores in your state. Like, it's not, there's no free choice of and so there's two types of government control states. There's ones where the government owns the liquor stores also. And then there's ones where the government is the distributor, but you can privately lease the license from them to run the liquor store. So again, at least you have a little bit more flexibility, but even there, it's still. So that's nuts, because then it's if you want a product and the bureaucrat, let's say he just hates the guy, he just doesn't like the brand, your state is not going to get that brand of alcohol. So these are the people who are going to turn to online, gray market forums, because they're like, I want this bottle and I am being deprived by some random bureaucrat of being able to have this whiskey because he doesn't like them, or he's never heard of them, or he can't take the time to go and order it.
I'm generally optimistic on crypto. Maybe not even anything specifically, apart from, I do think this puts a lot of pressure just on the system. And even though we're not wildly powerful insofar as having the vast majority of people onboarded to crypto rails, there is definitely an underlying understanding that we can opt out. You know what I mean? And that I have come around to this idea, right? I'm pretty close to being a full-time Bitcoiner, right? But at the same time, I do understand that just even the ability for somebody to say, okay, we don't like your rules, we're gonna opt out in some capacity. And if it means that I hold an NFT of a bottle on my wallet until I, go to that country or go to that state and pick it up, there's a way to get around, some of this stuff. And it does, I think it does, it chips away at bureaucracy, and it chips away at finding efficient markets. So yeah, we are coming up on time. I didn't think we'd talk about whiskey for an hour, but I do have a few more questions. I mean, it's kind of hilarious.
And I feel bad because I literally my team has to tell me, they're just shut up, stop talking about I will talk about this forever, particularly you were saying on the regulatory moat side. I'll give you just one more context over there so you understand how crazy it is. Let's say I'll use New York as the state, for example. In reality, if you want to think about a free market, I'm Maker's Mark, I have a product. I would go and say, okay, here's 3 different distributors. You can all distribute my product, and whichever one of you does the best job and sells more of it and gets more liquor stores to buy it, I'll give you more of my business or my higher premium products, special limited releases. In New York, you are required you can only sign with one distributor. So they have and a 2-year contract. So even if this person sells $0 of your whiskey, you are trapped. Like you will not then be able to get into this. Like you're beholden to this person for at least the 2 years you signed the contract. You can't put two distributors against each other to see who actually does a better job of selling my product and marketing it and getting it into people's hands. And so like consumers are literally like, as far as a regulatory moat, like these distributors hold both the liquor stores, like the liquor stores, like, oh, you want, it's not Buffalo Trace or Pappy Van Winkle that makes you buy Fireball in order to get Pappy Van Winkle. It's the distributor. They're like, okay, well, we have this stuff on our book, so you have to take this in order for us to sell you this other stuff. And then at the liquor store, so they're holding both sides hostage. And then to the brand, they're like, oh, you want us to sell a bunch of your Fireball? Well, you need to make sure that you give our state, because Pappy only makes, whatever, call it 100,000 bottles of all the different types of Pappy a year. They're like, great. Well, we want to make sure that we get 20,000 of those bottles, even though you need to divide them in theory across 50 states plus international markets. They're like, and if not, New York, it'd be a real shame if New York didn't get any Fireball this year in time for Christmas. Like they really have like this almost mafia operation where they have both sides really in a stranglehold.
It's wild. Yeah. Okay. I want to ask then, back to, I don't know, valuations and stuff, I suppose. I don't know if we touched on that before, but I am curious. How do you look at, and obviously not financial advice, but like, how do you look at investment in whiskey? And I don't know if somebody wants, like, how do you determine a bottle that will go up over, I don't know, an extended period of time? Somebody wanted to invest as opposed to trade in and out or speculate, whatever. Like, what do you kind of like, what's the overview there?
Yeah. So this is, and again, really emphasizing not financial advice, because everyone has their own strategy for these things. Or again, they do technical analysis and pretend that they do. So the biggest things for me when I look historically, like what is it that made the bottles that are super valuable today, super, super valuable? Like why are they so, bottles that again started off as your typical whatevers are now worth tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it touches back on what I said originally about that scarcity and the deflationary element, which is these bottles, however many originally were released, they need to be incredible whiskeys that people like write about and talk about and become things that are like achieve legendary status. Like people are like, this was an incredible whiskey. And so
what's an example of like, sorry to cut you off, but what is an example of a bottle that just like achieved legendary status? I'm just curious.
So I'll give a perfect Linnell. It's called a Red Hook Rye. It was Linnell's Red Hook Rye. So this was a single barrel special release by this woman named Linnell. She used to run a liquor store in Red Hook, Brooklyn. She now lives down in Alabama, and she runs a liquor store down there. But she did this private barrel exclusively for her store I think it was the early 2000s or so, give or take. I think 90s or 2000s. It was sometime around then. And the bottle was, I think it was somewhere between $150 and $250, like MSRP. And again, back then that was considered insane. Like that was insane for somebody to think that they should pay that for a bourbon or a rye. Like, forget like certain super old scotches or things like that was considered nuts. Those bottles now trade like regularly between like $20,000 and $80,000 a bottle. Because there are almost none left, because it was a great bottle. And then the whiskey nerds and bloggers and, forum goers of the past 20 years were reading about it. And they were like, oh, this sounds amazing. This is incredible. Like, and they would buy a bottle for 500 or 1,000 or 2,000. And it hit the point where like, there are just so few left in circulation at this point. And the number of, fanatics and people who have now entered the market, because keep in mind, every year you get a new draft class of people who turn 21 who are now legally eligible to to drink, and that can start to get and determine if they become whiskey fans or kind of go down that path. And they read those same blogs when they start becoming a little bit more fanaticized and they're like, oh my god, I'd love to try this. And they're like, they Google it and it's like, oh cool, I don't have $125,000 for this bottle. But I mean, we see this in crypto, like random people, and they end up having $125,000 of stupid spending cash one day that they're like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna go buy an NFT that was considered to join that club that was considered unattainable when I first got into this market or stuff like this, and that happens. And so people so that's like one thing is like finding a bottle that is spoken really highly of among nerds. Like the nerds really like it, so that they talk about it and that they're drinking it. Like, so what I tell people is what you really want is you want the bottle to be really, really reasonably priced at release.
Yeah.
Like there are bottles now that are released at like, Macallan just launched a new bottle, and granted it's the oldest single malt scotch ever produced. It's 84 years old. But it's $190,000 plus tax for MSRP. So like those bottles are not really going to get consumed anytime soon.
It seems to me that like whiskey amongst a number of other assets has taken a role as sort of like as long-term store of value. Like everybody is trying to escape the impending doom of fiat. And you see this with Russian oligarchs and art storing it in these vaults in Amsterdam and Geneva, and you see like these kind of collector items just getting bid up with what ironically is sort of this absurd monetary premium. What is a price point at which you don't think people are really consuming it? Like, I'm always curious. I see, like, I know you and I have chatted before. Like, I've seen you talk about somebody buying a bottle for like $750,000. It's like, does anybody actually drink that at that point, or is it purely like you don't own a Patek, you merely pass it on or whatever to the next generation, right? Like, is it like sort of the same premise there? And also, I'm rambling now, but I wanted to ask, like, what is the like terminal value of these things? Do these just continue to appreciate in value? Is this your sort of opinion?
So. Yeah. Okay. So the most expensive bottle that I have ever seen opened, it was that bottle I was telling you that sold for $750,000. I know people who have opened that. Now, again, they may have paid less. I know people who paid more and opened it, but that bottle. And so when we talk about like Veblen goods, like it's the real thing is conspicuous consumption. It's not conspicuous ownership. Yeah. And so like the ultimate flex is not great. Okay. You have a Van Gogh on your wall. That's really nice. But like, I know that you're just going to go and sell it to the next guy when you get the offer and you need to move money. When you have the money to open at $1 million bottle of whiskey, and it's like, when this is gone, it's got like, I can't go and sell this to the next guy anymore. Like as far as, again, when you're talking about like, oligarchs and these people trying to flex on each other, that is I'm going to light my cigar with an $100 bill kind of thing. Like I am going to, like, that is the real consumption. And that becomes, and part of what happens over there also is this Van Gogh is going to end up in a museum. So you and I get the same enjoyment looking at somebody else's Van Gogh as they have looking at it. Yeah. Nobody else is going to get to be able to try this whiskey if we've just, if we've opened it and so like there's, again, for certain people that is like part of the appeal also is like, it's like those people that like, go to dinners and eat like, endangered animals, like endangered species. It's like, we're going to be the only people on earth who are going to get to do this. Like there's like endangered whiskeys that are close to going extinct. So that is definitely a part of it. As far as like, there are some whiskeys that will never get consumed. That's actually like a good point because the value is not in the whiskey itself. It's a part of like the packaging. So like some of these things are done in like I've seen there was like some vodka that was done in like a diamond encrusted decanter, like skull decanter or something. Like that vodka is the same vodka as something else. Like it's the same. And so like you have it there because it's one of one. It's an art piece. It's more of like, that's more like an art installation or something that retains value and staying sealed. So those will never get consumed because there's no purpose in consuming it. It's the exact same liquid as you would get out of a regular, I don't remember which brands did those. So like those are things that I don't think are good stores of value per se because or maybe they are because again, the values in the diamonds and the art and like it becomes just one of these things that's traded among like the ultra wealthy. But as far as like terminal value, so this is the thing I thought for a while, I was like, okay, like we've hit the peak, whiskey, this one bottle of Macallan sold for $1.2 million. Now, again, mind you, it's a 60-year-old Macallan that was distilled in, it was 1928. So it was bottled in 1988, 89. And that whiskey was one. And again, they had art, there's different labels. It's the same whiskey inside, but some of them went into the Macallan Fine and Rare collection. And then some of them were done as like artist series where like the artist painted the labels and did like really cool things. So I assumed that was a whiskey that like it had hit like $1.2 million and like, that's it. We've hit peak, like that kind of stuff. That same bottle just sold this year for $2.7 million. So what I've started to realize is like
easy flip.
Yeah, wait, exactly. No, like joking, but no joke. So what I've started to realize is that I actually don't think that there really is a cap on these things as the world we're talking about printing fiat, right? Like that's actually what you're measuring is like the fact that like we're printing so much more money. So like when you talk about assets, like, well, okay, $2.4 million was $1.2 million from 10, 20 years ago, as far as these types of things are concerned. So, so I don't think that there's a cap anymore in a way that I used to think that there was a cap because you can turn something now you can turn a whiskey or a thing into a Veblen good by putting it into the hands of the right people.
Yeah. I think what's interesting as well is that if I was to go and start digging into trading and buying whiskey as investment, it doesn't really matter what I think of it. One, I won't drink it. It matters what other people think. And that's like sort of the essence of the subjective theory of value. But I'm just saying, like, if people have these views like, oh, it's like beautiful undertones of grass and like all this nonsense, it doesn't really matter. But the last question I'm curious, like how much of this is, we kind of touched on this at the beginning, but like how much of this is like kind of complete conjecture? And I'll add one hilarious side note. You mentioned it for a second before. I read this thing about like how you become a highest level sommelier. And I think it was a New York Times piece, maybe Wall Street Journal. And it was like a complete castigation of this entire industry where you go through like years and years of training, and they had people blindfolded and they poured them. I cannot make this shit up. They poured them like a rosé, and like 50%, I'm making this up, but I have to, everybody needs to go read this article. Like 50% of people said blindfolded that it was a red wine. Like it was absolute conjecture. These people. So I'm curious when it comes to whiskey and spirits, how much of that applies? Once again, my point was saying like, it doesn't matter. I don't care if somebody like believes this or not, but like, what is your opinion? Like, percentage wise, how many people are just complete bullshitters? Yeah.
So, I'll put it like this. There's a big thing in the industry of like awards, like whiskey awards, like we won gold medal at this or that. I basically I don't take awards into account at all. I think that I think awards are like the pinnacle of BS. Like when it comes to like whiskey tasting and these types of things, oftentimes for multiple reasons, oftentimes they're like pay to play. Like to even be considered for an award, you have to pay to submit your bottle, which means you've already narrowed down the pool of bottles that are going to be eligible to brands that are willing to pay for these types of things and then tout them. And methodologically, they're all flawed. Like these people sit there for 3 days and drink like 150 samples of different whiskeys. And I'm like, by the third whiskey, like I have a friend who's she's written a book on like she's like an expert taster, like literally. And she's written a book and she's like, by your third sample, you've lost like all of these chemical notes that you've lost them. You're not getting them anymore. So I'm like, great. So your first 3 whiskeys are going to get your absolute highest ratings, even if you do it blind, because everything afterwards, you're going to miss the notes of lemon or citrus or whatever it is. So I'm like, this is not scientifically sound. This is garbage. So I disregard all of those things. There's a lot of it that is conjecture and is subjective and is people just like, kind of doing the whole like waxing poetic. And, if you pour them, regular Buffalo Trace, but you put it into a Pappy bottle, like psychologically, there's like studies that'll show they'll think it's better. They'll tell you it's better than if you just poured them the Buffalo Trace. What's actually really, really cool about this that I love is like, I often have friends who they're into whiskey. They're not like experts by any means or whatever. And so I actually will pour them things. I take their opinion more than anyone I like who knows whiskey. Like if they're seeing the bottle, because I'm like, do you like this? And the answer is like, yes or no. And like, they're not trying to be like, they don't know how expensive it is. They don't know what they're supposed to think. I'm just like, do you enjoy what you just consumed? And like, what are you tasting? Because that's the other thing is like, for me and for people who like train themselves on it, like we spent like trying to find like notes and this, and it's like, oh, it's not fruit. It's like, it's red apple skin, or it's that, like you get really specific. And like, again, and it's like, And it's like, hey, is this good? Like that, like at the end of the day, like that's ultimately what people want to know. So yeah, a lot of it is people kind of just pontificating and BSing. But to separate even on the Psalm side, there's this, like, I think it was a Netflix or something called Psalm, this like movie.
Yeah.
And they show what you need to do to be able to become a master Psalm. Now, again, I agree with you. Someone who's a Somali or whatever.
Wait, this is a movie,
It's
not
a movie.
Yeah, I think I've seen it. It's about this girl, right? And she goes and I don't know. I saw one about this girl who goes to France, or there's grapes. What's the Japanese one I'm thinking of?
That was Drops of God. That's Drops of God. And that was okay. That movie was awesome. Okay, like, or that series, that show. That show. Okay, highly recommend. Drops of God. Really, drama, like whatever. Really fun movie. Then, if you want to learn how crazy wine forgery is and how crazy this pontificating is, there's another movie called Sour Grapes, where it literally shows you how this guy who has like one of the world's greatest palates was like the world's greatest wine forger. He would like mix a bunch of cheap wines together and put it into a bottle of like a Domaine Romani Conti or like a Lafite Rothschild, and like people, experts, like were being fooled into thinking they were drinking it. But to go one layer back, there's this movie Psalm, which talks about these people who study for the Master Sommelier exam. And again, I'm not talking about all the other levels. These are the people that like you hand them a glass of wine and they can tell you the vintage, which side of the mountain it grew on in like Bordeaux. Like these are people. Now, again, I'm sure you could fool them also if you told them whatever. But they clearly at least have trained themselves to be able to do things that like I definitely cannot when I try a glass of wine, which is interesting. This is good. There are real experts like that. But this is why I really like, I almost think, and it's something that we want to do for Baxus, is like I actually think the best model for this is Rotten Tomatoes. Give me your expert source. Yeah. Give me your expert critic score. All of the people who we know who are, but that's the other thing. Almost all whiskey reviewers, almost none of the reviews are written blind. And so because the industry isn't that big, like, and you like the people who are making the whiskey, like if you have terrible things to say, more often than not, you're just not going to publish a review. Yep. There's very few people who are like, this is the worst whiskey I've ever. It's really, you'll get that from like random bloggers who have nothing to lose, kind of. They don't have any relationships with the brand. So I think Rotten Tomatoes would be like the best model for how to really, really determine is like, here's what the experts are saying, but here's what like the average guy who just goes and buys a bottle off the shelf is saying about this, because the ones that line up, fantastic. Okay, that means it's a really, really great bottle. Like, but the ones that are completely separated one way or the other, like, okay, like are the critics being too snobby, or are they, actually just covering up for a friend who's making really bad whiskey?
This has been absolutely fascinating. We went on, I had no idea we could ramble about this for a long time. I'm glad we didn't talk too much about blockchain, so maybe this will kind of switch it up. But this was fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.